Okay, so the first lecture of this unit. Sociology, families and family relationships. Hi, welcome. For those of you who haven't seen me before, I'm Gail Brooks, and I wrote it and I will be presenting this unit this trimester, and it's lovely to meet you all, and lovely to have you people online joining us as well. Well, I was thinking about how we'd begin this lecture at 4 o'clock this morning. I get nervous. We could just have, I was thinking about, and I suppose the question I thought would be useful to ask at the beginning is, why would you want to do a sociology of the family? What is it? I mean, a family. We wouldn't all be sitting here if it's at some level we hadn't been involved with some sort of relationship that could be included under the family. It may not have been a marriage. It may have been. It may not be involved another person directly. If you were sort of fertilised in vitro, but at some level, the very fact of us being here suggests that there is the meaning behind the family. The family means something that's very fundamental, something that speaks first and foremost, I suppose, to a relationship which is biological. So in other words, we were born into some context that, as little creatures, some context that probably would be covered under this term, the family. So so the fact that we are born into a context without a choice, so we wouldn't choose, we often say we didn't choose our parents. Sometimes those of us who parents say we didn't choose our kids. My daughter used to say, "You borned me out, it's your fault." Whenever she did anything wrong, my bad behaviour is your fault. But we don't choose this context where we appear in. We'll get our timing right. I mean, I didn't know whether I should start or shouldn't start, but we'll get our timing right properly. But that we are born into this thing called the family has a profound effect on us for the rest of our lives. And that effect might be, as we see as we go through this unit, positive and negative. Sometimes both, sometimes either or. But it's we cannot escape the effect of this thing called the family. So the reason why, I guess, a sociology for family, as far as I'm concerned, is that it is one and the same time so obvious to us, this thing called the family, because we're born into it or grown up in whatever version it took. It's so obvious to us, it's because it's like nature. We don't question it. But at the same time, it is profoundly social institution. In other words, living in a family leaves you exposed, I think, primarily to the sort of social forces that will shape you. So it depends what sort of family you live in, when in history you live, you are living in, when in history you were born, and obviously what cultural ideas predominated in the world that you grew up. So a sociology of the family is almost, the existence of the family almost demands a sociology, as far as I'm concerned. In other words, asking questions is something which we take for granted and try and explore some unexpected dimensions of that thing. The second thing I want to say is that although I've put family up there as singular, the unit and the book is called Families. Hi. There's always pictures. No problem. Nice to see you. It doesn't really make any sense to talk about the family. I think everyone in our own personal experiences understands that. That just talking to each other, you might find you have different family experiences. You might come from a same-sex family. You might come from a single-parent family. You might have been adopted, sometimes all three. That you might have grown up in a huge sort of extended group of people who are all interacting and interrelated to each other, or you might have grown up in quite a sort of enclosed sort of environment. So the family takes a whole range of forms, and these forms reflect not just the time we live in and the culture we live in, but also people's choices. So I think, especially now in the 21st century, we find that people are making quite conscious choices about how better to live in families and how to express themselves through this thing called the family. Okay, so that's my sort of brief answer to why sociology of the family. And in the unit overall, we'll sort of begin from that point, I guess. Today I'm going to look at three other ideas that sort of come under the heading, why sociology. One is the family as image, which is a ubiquitous element of this topic. The second is the family as a legal entity, because if you've grown, I mean, even when you're born, by virtue of being born into a family group, you are subject to certain legal requirements, whether it's your right to education, or your right to have your birth registered and so on. So there's all sorts of legal things. And the final one, which I think is, for me, the most interesting, is the ideological importance of the family. What purpose does this entity that is so familiar and yet so complex, what purpose does that serve for keeping society together, for what sociologists call social order? I want you to talk to me about this image. This image, just to describe it, is a group of individuals. What do we see there? Start from the very basics. If you're, who and what do you see in that grouping?
You see mum and dad and the two kids.
Right.
The stereotype of normal.
Yes. Well, you see, you're already using that very useful sociological term, stereotype. What is a stereotype? Do you want to just...
It's pretty much assuming that it's got to be that way. Like if, say, you enjoy living out west, you stereotype to wear cowboy hats and boots, whereas reality, it's completely different.
Right. So that's sort of what happens within a stereotype. But what does that mean? Do you know what I mean? Why did you use that term, stereotype?
Basically, because life's more complicated than what it seems.
Good answer.
And by saying that that's the way it's got to be, it's more dictating everyone's life to say we've got to follow a certain path. But it's just life is too complex to live by that line.
So it's sort of like Weber. I don't know if anyone heard about Max Weber, one of the great social theorists of the 19th and late 19th, early 20th century. If you've done social theory with Alan Scott, you'll have heard a lot about Weber. Weber calls these ideal types, or he did. He said this is the way we understand the complexity of the social world by coming up with an ideal type to describe, as you quite rightly... Sorry, what's your name?
Sammy.
Sammy. Oh, sorry, Sammy. I've seen your thingy online. For example, if you had... I always use ducks as an example. I've no idea why. But there are plenty of types of ducks. And there's sort of all different sorts of ducks. But if you had to draw a duck, and I'm going to do this very badly, you'd sort of draw something like that. No, you wouldn't. Which has no resemblance to anything there. But sort of, like, do you remember when you were kids, or if you've talked to little kids, or you've got little brothers and sisters, you say, draw a cat. And they get, that one I used to do that with my kids, and they'd say, Mummy, draw this, Mummy, draw that. And what you draw is something like this. You couldn't do unless you're an artist, a picture of an extraordinary picture of a duck with all its distinctive features and it's different from every other duck. What you've got here is an ideal type. It's just like it's almost almost a coded version of reality that's very complex. And I think when Sammy was using the notion of a stereotype, what you're saying is that in order to, it's to make sense of a very complex situation, you come up with the fundamental features of something, like the duck. And in this case, the fundamental features of a family. Do you want to say any more about the picture? First of all, Sammy, would you say mother and a father? Because we're making an assumption that this is, yeah. What do you think?
He could be her father, who knows?
Could be her father. Yes, it could, because he actually looks a bit older, doesn't he? So it could be. The point is we don't know what relationship these people have to each other, do we? That's the point. But they're arranged in a particular way to suggest something.
Well, he's very possessive.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And like higher up. So it's sort of the male dominance. The husband is the apex of the family. And I think, oh no, it's probably the wrong hand. Yeah, you can't see the wedding.
Yes, I don't know who's
You just see they're married.
That's the mothers? Yeah, I think, yes, I think it is the mothers. But he's very much, he's sort of encircling this group, isn't he? It's,
well, they're all sort of leaning back towards him.
nice.
They're leading on male.
And so what's the message we're getting there? Yes, leading on male. What message is that image conveying to us about families? Stereotypical message.
Well, it's that patriarchal nuclear family, that typical,
Yeah.
they all depend on him, he's kind of the centre of it.
So we've got a message in here, and the other thing about, and we'll talk about this to go back to this at the end of the lecture, is the ideological message here is one that's very powerfully gendered at the moment, isn't it? So we have the male, as someone so nicely said, the apex of the whole image, and that everyone's arranged around the male, and the female especially is sort of being protective of the children. So there's every message that you could possibly put together about the family. What about the children? I mean, first of all, why children? Because that's what we've got to ask as sociologists. This is one of the naturalised versions. Is if you think family, you think children. Like if you think family, you think marriages. But that doesn't necessarily happen that way. But we're so powerfully sort of shaped by these norms and values that that's just what we assume. So we assume, I guess, that these little individuals, these small humans here, are actually related biologically to the two adults. Do we? What about the children, though? Tell me a little bit more about how the children look in this picture.
It looks like carefree.
Okay.
It looks as if they're biologically theirs, not adopted because they're not Asian or anything, and they're pretty similar in colouring. So looks like it's their biological children, which is a pretty standard family thing in terms of stereotypes.
Yes. Yes. And actually, if you want to look further, even the children are gendered, are they? How? Tell me how. You guys.
Classic one boy, one girl.
That's true. Yes.
Boy with short hair, girl with long hair.
Yes. What about the way they're arranged in the photograph? I wonder if the photographer actually knew that they'd done all this. So
Girl just clinging to mummy.
yes, girl clinging to mummy, and the boy, facing straight out, staring directly at the camera. She's sort of looking sort of coyly under her hair and clinging to mum. So again, you've got the messages not only about what the adults do, but also what the children are doing here. Finally, what about the setting of this? Where are they? Yep. Yes. Well, if they're not in a paddock, they're certainly on a backdrop of a paddock, aren't they? So we don't. But what and why? What is there a message that we might want to take from that as well? What
Maybe
is?
they're on their property, on their family.
Oh,
They might be on their farm or their land.
true. Absolutely, it could be a statement about property ownership, I guess, couldn't it? But when you put things in the natural setting, in the sort of in the world of nature. Doesn't know what it is.
Natural
House.
family.
Yes, a house. You know, if you want to sell a house, or if you want to, you know, if you want to sell like somewhere to stay, a hotel or something, people, it's always, especially in this country, because we've got so much of it, it's almost always. And I was just looking for a room to stay in on Thursday night because I've got to go to a funeral, and I was looking at sort of, you know, what if and checking out these places, and they always talk. They're constantly talking to you about what a beautiful country setting, whatever this place is in, and how much greenery there is. So there's something about the world of nature which is deeply attractive, is very, very good at selling things, whether it's hotels or family images. And the message, as someone who said under all of this, by putting them there and not in a city park where the swings are, which you could easily have done, but by putting them here, you're underlining the message that the family is natural, and something that is natural is, you know, makes you happy. They couldn't be happier. They're ecstatic.